Hello, everyone. I'm Jack Hammer. This is my partner, Jessie Naylor. Welcome to episode 2 of the Hammer and Nails Show, where we get down to the brass tacks of 49ers football every Thursday night. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm ready to talk 49ers. Since we last talked, a lot's happened, huh?
Oh yeah, so a ton of stuff has gone on. Since we signed off Thursday night, Friday morning we wake up. 49ers make this big deal with Miami to trade up from 12 to 3, swapping picks in round 1. Giving up a couple selections and 22, 23, the first rounders there, along with that third round comp pick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a crazy week.
Oh, definitely. It's been a good one. It's been really interesting to see how 49ers Twitter is handled the last basically 7 days almost now.
Yeah, you've got a big group of people that are pushing for Justin Fields. He's like the consensus guy that 49er fans want, it seems like.
Oh yeah, there's definitely there's a group I think that's pretty invested in that being the pick, and that being the right guy, and so you're seeing that narrative get pushed quite a bit. And I don't have a problem with Justin Fields. I think he's a pretty darn good quarterback. I think he's got a few things that pretty much all these guys have some things you got to worry about, right?
For sure.
So he definitely has some things to work on, and we'll see how it goes. Now that we're a week removed, kind of where do you fall on the whole thing as far as that trade?
Man, so last week we talked about grades, right? Mm-hmm. And I think were you at a C plus? Is that about where you were at?
Yeah, right in that range, C plus, B minus. Right in
there. Yeah, and I think I was at a B minus. If I'm regrading right now, I have to stand pat. So I'll say this, my grade hasn't changed because we don't know what quarterback we're going to take, right? Like that obviously plays a big factor into this. But the excitement level about the offseason went from about a 5 to a 10. Like that day, it was crazy. Like the way that I found out and didn't even know what was going on. I was at work and whatnot. It was crazy how things went down. So yeah, my excitement level is obviously through the roof. And as it sits today, I mean, the one thing that I'm glad happened is Shanahan came out during that press conference and said, absolutely, we are taking a quarterback. Like that, all that other stuff about maybe Pitts or Sewell or what have you got pushed to the side. And we know that a quarterback is going to happen at this point. Now it's just a matter of who, and everybody's got an opinion on which way it should go. You know where I stand. I'm not the biggest Mac Jones guy. And it's not that I don't think that he can play in this league, because I really do believe that he can. Mm-hmm. But trading all of those assets for a guy that is, in my opinion, his ceiling is just above average, maybe like the 14th best quarterback in the league or so, I can't see it. And that's the one move for me that I'm like, can't go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I hear you. I was, I think you followed a lot of the things that I've been saying over this offseason, and I wasn't very high on any of these guys being really any of these quarterbacks of being somebody that I want to trade up for.
Right.
Or really past like the 7th spot. I was okay maybe giving up that second round pick, but even that I wasn't really super high on that either. But the way that they were able to get this deal done and keep all of their picks for this year, that's part of why I like the move that they made there. And then, on top of that comp pick that they gave up next year in the third round, the third round pick that they gave up, that's the comp pick. So they still have their own.
Right.
So, it's really a great deal, I think, for the 49ers to go up there and get the guy that they want, whichever one it is that they're going to end up choosing.
Yeah. And if you look at first round picks anyways, I mean, first round picks are always tough to negotiate and figure out who's going to be good and who's worth it and who's not. First round picks tend to fail a lot. And especially where the 49ers are probably going to be picking, let's assume, things go well, everybody's healthy, where the 49ers are going to be picking, you're probably going to have a 50-50 shot at best. So really losing the next 2 years first round, it's not the end of the world for me. As long as they make the right choice this year. 49er fans like to say, hey, I trust Kyle, whatever he wants to do. And I was kind of that same mindset. But then again, I started to look at it and was like, well, let's be honest. They've had 6 first-round picks to this point, and let's assume that Kinlaw is actually going to work out. They're 50%. If he doesn't work out, they're at 40% hits. So now you've mortgaged your future for a guy that we don't know how well he's going to work out. And there's a lot of boomer bust guys out there. There's a lot of non-experienced quarterbacks. So I'm very curious to see who they go with. And if that pick ultimately works out, because if it doesn't, we know that Shanahan and Lynch are both out of here.
Yeah, and I agree on that last part as far as them being out. I wrote an article this week basically saying that on Monday. The whole talk with Shanahan hasn't had a lot of success in the league, really, when you get down to it. I understand his offenses have put up a lot of yards, but he's only had, I think, 4 seasons now out of his 13 where his teams have been even in the top half of the league in points scored. So they've really struggled to score points. And one of the main explanations that's always been given for that is it's been the team, it's been the quarterback hasn't been his, those types of things. And so, now that excuse is gone. He's going to get the guy that he wants. Yeah. Either that or him and John Lynch are going to fight it out. And it's, again, right, as the tweet that we saw earlier today. So, but either way, they're going to have a new guy in place, and their futures with the team really ride on this selection.
Yeah, and quite honestly, yes, that report came out today, and Lynch and Shanahan seem to have a difference in opinion. And actually, it's kind of interesting because from the people that seem to be plugged in, they said that Shanahan's the one that wants Mac Jones. And Lynch is the one that wants Mac Jones, which kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. And Shanahan's the one that wants to take a bit of a chance on somebody that can move a little bit. And that's kind of where they're going back and forth. So that to me was very interesting. But I will say this, if Shanahan is the ultimate decision maker, and we both know that he is, if this quarterback doesn't work out, Shanahan has to take full blame for it.
Yeah, I agree. And I can see that whole thing as far as Lynch wanting to go that route. That kind of quarterback makes sense based off of his past and where he's had success, right? And the teams he's played for, and his old university, and that whole thing as far as Stanford, Alabama, the way they run their offenses. So that makes sense. Yep. I'm definitely a Mac Jones guy. He's the top guy for me. But in watching film, I'm starting to come around to some of these other guys. I'm definitely higher on Trey Lance than I was after my first go around looking at it. So I'm just kind of thinking it through and knowing for sure now they're going quarterback. And
yeah. You've been watching a lot of Trey Lance, and I said when they made this trade, and I don't know how true it is now, but I said when they made this trade that I had a gut feeling that Trey Lance is the guy. And I have Trey Lance at number 2 out of all these quarterbacks. I know that you're starting to come around to Trey Lance. What is it specifically that you're seeing in his game that's kind of opening you up to the idea that, hey, maybe he is the guy?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think the first one is, you're seeing him run Shanahan's a lot of schemes. It's easy to see him fit into the 49ers scheme, right? Because they're doing a lot of the same things. You see him running some of the same shot plays that you see Kyle Shanahan call, those kind of things. So that's the first point. And the second point is when you watch him play, I can envision Shanahan be able to use his mobility to really screw with the defense because of the fact that they've got to account for him. He's not a guy like Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He's where they might be able to scramble for 5 yards. You're not really going to worry about him. Then scramble for 5 yards, chase him out of bounds. He's a guy that if you don't handle him, he can bust. And so that's a situation where that could potentially almost take a guy out of coverage, right? Because you got to spy on him. Now he can't drop into coverage. Just different things. And there's a lot of plays when you watch him move. There was one in one of the games this week where he runs play action. He kind of starts to roll to his right, but he sets up right over the tackle, and they run this deep slant go on the backside, and he just puts a perfect ball in there for a touchdown. And you could see that fitting in perfectly with what Shanahan's style is. So
yeah, absolutely. Keneal Mason says, "Let's talk about the best prospect, Lance." We're doing it, bud. I agree with you, by the way. I love Lance. He's the man. So he's the guy that I want. That's for sure.
Yeah. And Lance, a lot of people are going to point to his lack of passes. And I understand that. He kind of got the short end of the stick this year because of the whole COVID thing, losing the season. But if you look at the guy that came out of that college before him as a number first round pick, Carson Wentz, who went number 2, their numbers are very, very similar for the one. If you remember now, if you got to look back, Carson Wentz only played one full season at North Dakota State. He only started his junior season is the only season he played the full year. His senior season, he got hurt.
Yep.
So if you compare those 2 seasons to each other, their passing numbers are pretty even. And the other thing with Lance is he was getting pulled out of a lot of games in the fourth quarter, or even as early as the third quarter in some of the really bad blowouts.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because I do know that you're a big Mac Jones guy, and I know that you haven't swayed on that. But do you think that for you, a lot of the allure of Mac Jones was you were okay with taking him at, let's say, 9, or if he fell to us at 12, and now that we have moved up to 3, I mean, are you of the mindset that even if you're not as high on a Lance or a Fields or even a Zach Wilson right away, it's that extra factor of mobility that makes you think that, hey, if you're the one making that choice, even though you like Mac and you like what he brings to the table, that upside is just too hard to pass up at 3?
No.
No, okay. No, that's fair. I'm just curious to see where you're at.
No, I know. I see where you're going. And I mean, I see what that question. That's a really good question. Mm-hmm. For me, I just still see him as the best quarterback. And it's even as much as I've kind of grown to like Lance, and even in some of the stuff that Fields does, because Fields has always been the guy right behind Jones for me, as far as that's going back to the middle of February when I first put my first rankings out for the quarterbacks. The thing for me is just how quickly the ball comes out of his hand. They make big plays in that offense, and the big plays, they're not coming from the quarterback. They're coming from everybody else. But that's part of that's because he's getting the ball to them so quickly.
For sure.
He's such a good distributor of the ball.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he does his job. You can't knock him for doing his job by any means. And, there's a lot to like about Mac Jones. Again, for me, if you're taking a guy in today's NFL that's not mobile, it's really hard for me to buy into a guy at 3 that we're mortgaging our future for, that has no elite traits physically about him. And that's my hang up. I like Trask. To me, Trask was my number 3 quarterback. And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I've watched a ton of Trask and I think he's great, but by no means am I willing to take him at 3? Like, that's asinine. You know what I mean? So it's just it's one of those things to where, Fields, Wilson, Lance, I've got them 2, 4, and 5 on my list. And I'm taking the possible upside, the possibility that they can be a top 10 guy in this league. And really, when I look at it, I'm not comparing to how great this quarterback can be versus Jimmy. I'm comparing how elite this quarterback can be versus Matthew Stafford. And it looks like we lost Jack for a second. Oh, well, he'll be back. But I'm comparing how good a quarterback can be versus Matthew Stafford, because really, to me, that's the litmus test. Right now, we have the best quarterback division in football. And if we cannot have a quarterback whose upside is better than the 3rd best quarterback in this division, that's going to be an issue. And if you've mortgaged your whole future to get a guy who is at best the 4th best quarterback in this division, that's an issue. That's a major, major issue. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Until Jack is back, I don't have access to control the comments, so I will just read them. Do you gents feel this? So this is from Zachy D. Do you gents feel that Lance is a little risky for a team that has been pretty risk adverse at the QB position? Zachy, here's the problem. I don't disagree with that if you go after one of these guys, it is going to be a major risk. But at the same time, you just risked everything. You pushed all your chips onto the table to go up and get 3. You can't stop taking risks at this point. Like, you're already all in. So you just got to let the cards fall where they may. And if taking a quote unquote risk also nets you arguably a top 10 talent, that's where my mindset is with it.
Yeah, I hear you. That's a good way to go. I mean, yeah, I'm not against going that direction at all. That's, for me, Jones is the top guy, but if they go in one of those other two directions, I think that they're still going to be able to make it work.
For
I
sure.
think they're, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But when you watch Fields play, even Lance to a certain extent, you don't see guys that are just running around like crazy. That's much more Zach Wilson's game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm fine with any of those three guys. I really would like to see any of those guys come to San Francisco, and it'd be really interesting to see Kyle Shanahan take one of those quarterbacks, given his history and where he's been in the past.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Okay, so let's take Mac Jones out of it. Let's say it's between the three quote unquote improvisers, Lance, Fields, and what's his name? Lance, Fields, Zach Wilson. Yeah, God, I don't know where I had a brain fart on that. Lance, Fields, and Wilson. Between those three, place them in order 1 to 3. Of who you would want most.
It would be Jones, Fields, Lance, Wilson.
So you would put Fields ahead of Lance. Interesting. But you would also have Wilson last, which I would as well. So why would you put Wilson last out of that group?
Of all the quarterback of those out of that group of 4, he's the one who struggles the most with actually playing quarterback. Anytime he has any kind of bodies around him, he really struggles when he's got pressure. And you saw that come out in the Coastal Carolina game. I understand there were some other some other circumstances around that caused some trouble there. When the fact that the game didn't get scheduled until I think like Tuesday and it was played a couple of days later, stuff like that. So there were some issues there. But you go back and watch Zach Wilson play in 2019 when the competition against. You saw him dealing with that. Watch him play against San Diego State. Now, the difference between BYU and San Diego State is not it's not like going from Utah to, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty level field of competition, and he really struggled against San Diego State. He struggled against Hawaii in the bowl game. Just overall, you look at Mac Jones in 2019, and he turned the ball over as much as he scored.
Yeah.
So for me, that's really where
Wilson. You mean Wilson turned it over as much as he scored? I think you said Mac Jones.
Okay, yeah, I might have, but yeah, definitely was that.
You got Mac Jones on the mind.
I guess. Yeah, no, but yeah, with Wilson, that's definitely what you saw.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Twisted Eva says Fields, Trey, and Wilson. He actually agrees with you. He has the same exact order. For me, I'm flip-flopping Trey and Fields, but I mean, I'm not going to argue it too hard. But Wilson, for me, and I said this on Grant's show last night, he's like a professional dunker. So there's professional basketball players, and then you've got these guys who are professional dunkers. That's literally what they do. They have dunk competitions. There's a guy by the name of Jordan Kilgannon. He's 6'1" white guy, and he's crazy. Like, he does the craziest dunks that you've ever seen. Like, no NBA dunk contest can do what this guy does. He's insane. However, if you watch him, he can barely dribble a basketball. Like, it's the fundamentals. He could never be a basketball player. He's just got all the pizzazz and flash, and that's exactly how I look at Wilson. Mm-hmm. You watch him, and it showed up in his pro day. You watch him roll left, wing it far downfield right, and you even have Lawrence coming out and tweeting, sheesh, like, this guy's amazing. But what nobody talks about is it was either the next play or the next throw or the throw after that he had a 5-yard out pattern that he missed by 1.5 yards, 2 yards. He doesn't do the basics, and he doesn't execute on the basics. He's going to get killed at the next level if he plays the way that he did in college. He's not athletic enough to beat even defensive tackles at the next level. And being at 212 pounds or whatever he is, already having shoulder surgery, it's a concern for me.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you on the athleticism. I think he's got the athleticism. But it's his build. He's a little bit of a smaller guy, and I just you don't see that style of play really translate as well. I mean, I don't know. It's hard. You watch him play at BYU, and this year everything just fell into place for him as far as the level of competition being down, and you watch them on film or watch him in the games, and it's just a lot of short stuff every once in a while, and then it's a zing down the field with nobody around him.
Yeah.
So I don't know with him. I think that if they go that direction, that's going to be the roughest scenario for them.
Yeah, and when I say he doesn't have the athleticism, I guess what I mean by that is if he plays like he did in college, where he likes to run around like a chicken with his head cut off, if he can control himself and play like, let's say, an Aaron Rodgers or Mahomes, even a Wilson, where he can use his athleticism sparingly in tight moments, he absolutely can get the job done athletically. But if he's relying on that athleticism, I don't believe, like, let's say him and Fields come in, you can't do the same things with Wilson that you could with Fields at the next level, in my opinion, athletically.
Correct. I don't think that they're different. So
yeah,
no, I think for me personally, I would stay. That's the one. He's the one person that I would stay away from if I was the 49ers.
For sure.
I've kind of felt that way throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
You watch him on, like I said, you watch him on film. We're going to actually be there'll actually be a breakdown tomorrow. Just to kind of give everybody a heads up. There'll be a breakdown at 11 o'clock tomorrow over on Grant's channel, where we're going to be going through Zach Wilson, and we're going to be going through his game against Coastal Carolina.
Oh, so, okay, that'll be a good one.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I understand there were some extenuating circumstances around that game. With it being set up late and all that kind of stuff. But what I saw when I watched the film really quick through the first time was the same guy that I saw in 2019. Mm-hmm. Because he was dealing with pressure.
Yeah,
it was the one time where he really got pressure, and there were some other parts of the game that I'll point out tomorrow that were concerning. I think it was really for only time all year he was really challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlos Barboza says all of the prospects have huge talent, but anyone Hall of Fame. That's way far out, and I have no idea. I have no clue. But I think what I will say is to that point, the likelihood of any of these guys being Hall of Fame is very slim to none, and we just gave up an awful lot.
Yeah, we did, for sure. The 49ers definitely gave up. They gave up a lot. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Kind of going back to that trade and kind of the thoughts on it. I kind of mentioned at the beginning. I like the deal. It's really going to depend on what happens with Garoppolo, because depending on when they move him, if they can get, as we were talking about on another show, was the possibility of trading him for a second round pick that could be escalated up to a first round depending on playing time. Very similar to what the Carson Wentz. That's what people. I think we've just watched so much of his game, and we've, as 49er fans, downgrade him because of our frustrations with him. But when he's actually been on the field, he's been pretty darn good. I think around the league, people are a little bit higher on him than 49er fans are. They're not going to give the 49ers a first round pick straight up. But,
no.
Something along the lines of the Carson Wentz deal, where it's a second that could become a first based on playing time, or maybe a third that goes up to a second.
Yeah.
At that point, you're going into 2022 with all the same picks, other than maybe your first round coming later, or having to be a second rounder that you can then have 2 seconds and trade up into the back of the first or whatever.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that he's revered across the league a little bit more than what we tend to think he is. But with that said, this is a very different situation than, what the Lions did, or let's say the Eagles with Wentz. Let's say let's say they're even as far as what they're worth. Nobody knew for sure. Like, there was speculation that they wanted to move on from Wentz, but they did a good job of moving very, very quickly to make sure that his value couldn't drop, and B, acting as if this new regime actually wanted Wentz. To whereas the 49ers have made it very clear Jimmy is not their guy. He hasn't been for a couple of years, and pretty much everybody knows that. So they're like, well, why would I give up a ton when he's either A, going to be available for nothing if he gets cut in the offseason, or B, I'll wait a year and he'll probably get cut then and we can get him for nothing then. So I think that's the hard part, is how much did the 49ers kind of shoot themselves in the foot the way that they've been playing it? I know that they want to act slick, like they actually, Jimmy's a part of our plan. Well, now we're trading to 3, but he's still a part of our plan. We love Jimmy. It's like, well, I think everybody knows that you probably really don't love Jimmy.
Yeah, maybe not as much as you're saying you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. They do a really good job when they're talking of saying enough to answer the question, but at the same time not really answering it and always leaving themselves an out based off of what their responses are.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Garoppolo go. I also wouldn't be surprised to see him stay. I mean, at this point, who knows what's going on? Because the deal with moving him is the salary cap. There's no benefit to the salary cap at this point.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Do you want to explain that real quick? Because I know there was some back and forth, people asking me questions on Twitter. So some people thought that there was a benefit. If we had cut him, we could roll that money over. And it's like all of a sudden we've got, $50 million next year. Do you want to explain why it is not a benefit?
Well, if they cut him now, we're going to have this season. Then there's going to be, $40 million on the cap that can roll over into next year.
Right.
If they do it that way, if they don't do it that way, let's say they keep him on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So instead of rolling it over, let's say they keep him on there this season and then they decide they cut him, trade him, whatever, say March 1st of next year.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between doing it now and doing it then is about $1.4 million.
Right.
So that's how much that's how much more money they make based off of doing it the rollover versus releasing them next season.
Right. Right. And by the way, if they stay that far under the cap, then they can roll that money over the next year. It's the same difference.
Correct. So there's really not a big financial benefit to doing it now. So I think that's part of why they get away with saying, "Oh, we're fine with keeping them. We don't need to release them."
Right.
I think that's part of it too, because they're seeing the way that they structured that contract was always in their benefit from the start. It was a terrific contract that they gave him because you knew when they brought him over from New England, his deal was either going to be, if they were going to give him multiple years, that was going to be fine, but otherwise it was going to be a franchise tag.
Yeah.
And all they did was give him the franchise number times 5. That's really all they did. And by doing it that way instead, is it allowed them to create a contract in which that first year was really low, so they could add pieces around them. 2019 got a little bit higher. They gave them a lot of flexibility to do things, and here at the end now they have almost no dead cap, and they can move off from them whenever they're ready.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, Prague really structured that contract extremely well.
Yeah, it was really good. I know we've gone through this based off of everything that's gone on with that trade. Now, where do you see the off season? Yeah.
So like I said, for me, it's excitement level is through the roof. Like, at least we have something to talk about, right? Like, it's funny because Grant and I were discussing this. Is like, man, we're really about to hit that dead part. Like, there's not a lot to talk about. And then as soon as that trade happened, I was like, well, we've revived the offseason. Here we go. Like, we've got content beyond content. So from a content perspective and an excitement level as a fan, through the roof. But it all depends on who we take. And again, if it's Mac Jones, I'm immediately like, I'm ready to pack bags for Shanahan. Like, I went from a B- to an F immediately. Like, I'm out. But if it's one of the guys that I spoke of, just because of the upside possibility, I'm gonna say that it was an A, because Shanahan got his guy and it lines up with at least a guy that's got upside. And, maybe 2 years from now, I'll say, hey, that quarterback was a bust and it wasn't a good offseason. But for now, I can definitely bump it up to probably that A level if, in fact, we get a guy that has high upside. Just envisioning him and Shanahan's offense, I think we could do great things. Yeah, I agree with you on that, especially keeping all those draft picks like they were able to do. They should really be able to capitalize this offseason or this draft, because they have all these picks and getting that guy at number 3. I mean, how often do you have a team that's expected to be a Super Bowl contender if everybody's healthy, being able to draft in the top 15 2 years in a row? So, if they can come out of this draft and that quarterback plays out, yeah, it's going to be an A+ draft. I think when all is said and done, we'll have to, the off season. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. Just really depends on who they take, right? For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, that kind of transitions into the last question that you and I had set up was
Who do you think they're going to take?
Man, like I said, so when the trade first happened, I was like, they're going after Trey Lance. Like, that's the guy. But the more that I kind of step back and think about it, I really think the guy is actually Fields. And I can't help but to think that it really, if you look at Fields before that Northwestern game, he was the consensus number 2 guy the whole time. Like, it was Lawrence, Fields, and then everybody else. And then for whatever reason, the media and pundits decided to drive that stock down. And I think that stock is probably lower with fan bases than it actually is with the teams that are scouting him. You're talking about a guy that's been a winner and an elite quarterback since the high school level. And all this stuff about his work ethic is completely overrated. I think that he does work hard. I think he's extremely smart. I think that he wants to be great. And I think that in those interviews, that will show through. And that's going to be enough for him to be our guy.
Okay.
What about you?
The guy that I think they're going to take is, I think they're going to go after Zach Wilson.
Okay.
If Zach Wilson falls after number 2, it's going to be Wilson. It depends on what happens at that second pick. But if Wilson's there, I think they're going to take him. Just because if you go back to that press conference, there was a moment where they were asking with regards to the Trey Lance film, how, the fact that he didn't get to play, how does that hurt them? And, in his answer, Shanahan just brings up Wilson out of nowhere, mentions the fact that they didn't really get to see a whole lot of him either, which I think is odd. There's a couple, that one's kind of odd considering the fact that he played a full 12-game season. I think they only missed 1 game, right?
Right.
But I think where he was really going with that was that it goes back to the whole level of competition thing that we talked about. But this season, their schedule got blown up so bad, and they're just kind of playing. They really had a patty cake schedule, really, when you look at it. And I think that the one thing that they would have liked to have seen was him getting out there and being pressured, watching him actually have to play quarterback out. It isn't in a 7-on-7 type situation, because that's really what it was. I mean, of course, he's got guys rushing on him. And of course,
absolutely.
He's moving every once in a while, but there's just so many times where it's like he's playing in a 7-on-7 tournament out there. So I think it's going to be Wilson. If the Jets don't take Wilson, I think it's going to be Trey Lance. Okay.
Right. Well, okay. So Trey Lance, yeah, I guess my assumption was that the Jets are going to take him. And somebody asks, where's it at? Zymra says, Jack, do you feel like the Jets have a harder decision to make than the 49ers? What's your thoughts on that?
Harder decision. Yeah, I think so, because they're right there at number 2. So they got the second guy, and the pressure is going to be on them to take Zach Wilson. That's what everybody's talking about.
Yep.
But so are they going to take Wilson? Because if they don't go Wilson, and that's the guy everybody's talking about, I think that New York media is going to crush them. So I think that's part of the issue that they deal with there. So yeah, I would say that they have a harder decision. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, they're in New York, so they're going to get ridiculed more. So I will say that. But I would personally rather be at 2 than be at 3, because let's say quarterback does go 1 and 2, you're kind of left with whatever the leftover pieces are. And, chances are 3 out of the top 5 guys are going to dud out in the NFL. Like, that's just statistically, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. So let's operate under that assumption. And I'm not saying that the other 3 are definitely going to be the guys, but now you've got your choice of the 3 guys that weren't the top 2 consensus guys. Who do you pick? So I think that I would rather be at 2, even though I think that you can get ridiculed more if that guy doesn't end up panning out, especially if number 3 does pan out, and you could have had that guy also. But I personally would rather be at 2. I'd feel a lot better about this situation. And I'm not sold that we can't get up to 2 still. I know that there was rumors that came out that said the 49ers tried to go after 1, they tried to go after 2, and they couldn't get up there. Well, yeah, from 12, you're not going to get up there. And I don't think anybody has a shot to get to 1. However, let's say New York either A, doesn't want that pressure, or B, they don't even want to take a quarterback because they want to ride it out with Darnold for another year just to see what happens. Well, if you want Kyle Pitts or whoever, Sewell, whoever that guy is, you can still get him at 3, and you can sell to your fan base, much like we did when we passed on quarterback in 2017. Mm-hmm. Hey, we got the best guy in the draft that's not a quarterback. We believe in our quarterback. We're building something from the ground up. And by the way, we fleeced the 49ers just like the 49ers fleeced the Bears in 2017, and we picked up extra picks. So I'm not sold that we still can't get up to 2 at this point.
Yeah, there's definitely a possibility. I think it's going to take a pick and swapping that pick and probably giving up a player or maybe something else like a second down the road or next year, maybe even this year to do that.
Yep.
It's definitely going to take some trade, some capital. So it'll be interesting to see if they do move off of that 3 spot. I was just going to mention real quick, and Zachy over here, he mentions that both NU and actually he says Fields had only 2 bad games in his career, Northwestern, Indiana. And then in a second comment, both of them had top 7 Ds in all college football last year. And one thing I'm going to mention about that just real quick is they did definitely. I think you have to look at the fact that in 2020, the Big Ten only played the Big Ten though, right? It wasn't a normal year. So teams weren't moving around and playing like they normally do. They were only playing within their own conference. So, there's not as much talent up and down the lineup in the Big Ten, I'm sorry, as there is in the SEC conference. That's what it proves out every year in the NFL draft.
Right.
So I think that plays a little bit into them having such high rankings there. They're both very good football teams. Don't take anything away from them, but they're not. I don't know if I'd say they're both top 7. If they had to play against some of these other schools, I think they would have struggled a little more. Yeah,
and let's not act like Ohio State isn't stacked with talent on offense to offset that. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, yeah. They did. What's his name? Olave. He should have come out of. He should be in this draft. He'd probably be one of the top receivers taken in the draft. Yeah. And Trey Sermon is a heck of a running back. So when you watch all 3 of these quarterbacks that we're talking about, primarily, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance, all 3 of them have one thing in common: they all play on really good teams.
Yeah,
actually have 2 things in common, because on the backside of that, both of them have really good running games that support them.
Very true.
So
very, very true.
There's that part of it. There's part of that too. So, we'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what actually plays out when it all gets said and done.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Zach. He said true when you said what you said, and then after I said, he said also true. I knew there was a reason that I listened to you 2 jokers. Well, we appreciate it. Jordan Rice says, do you think that Fields could go 1 with the Urban Meyer connection? If so, who should we get? I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen. That would be really interesting. That would turn the whole draft upside down, right? Because nobody's expecting that.
Yeah.
If that were to be what actually goes down. I don't think that Justin Fields was ever in Ohio State with Urban Meyer. In fact, I know he wasn't.
He wasn't.
2018 was Meyer's last year there at OSU, and that was the year that he was in Georgia. So they were never together. But Meyer definitely has a connection with his coach,
for sure,
and things like that. So who knows? I mean, crazy stuff happens. Maybe it's Trent Baalke in Jacksonville. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I will say this: if Jacksonville had fallen to 2 and the Jets, had done what they were supposed to do, which was not win, and they took Lawrence, I think there's no doubt about it that Fields would have gone 2. To be honest with you, I'd say no question, Fields is going 2. Now we're choosing between Wilson, Lance, Mac Jones, and whoever. But with them being at 1, I think if you don't take Lawrence, you will be killed across the league. Lawrence is the consensus number 1, not only quarterback, but possibly player in this draft. I'd have a hard time seeing them pass. And we've basically heard Urban Meyer, who really has no reason to throw up a smokescreen, say, yeah, we're taking Lawrence.
Yeah. So that's, I don't think that'll happen, but that would definitely make for a fun first night of the draft. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, Lee. Yeah, it would. Lee Bing says the trade to number 3 was a panic move to get the 3rd best quarterback in the draft. Well, what I'll say to that, I can't fully disagree. Maybe it was a panic move. Kind of seems like that a little bit, but what I will say is it's to get the 3rd best quarterback in your eyes and in my eyes. We don't know how this thing pans out in 5 years. That could be the best quarterback. And I'm not saying that I would bet on that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. You don't know how these career arcs are going to go. One thing I will say is whoever we bring in is definitely coming to a talented team. And a lot of times the team and scheme of where you go is the difference maker. And so maybe the talent level from a Lawrence to, let's say we get a Fields, let's say Lawrence is a 10 and Fields is an 8. Well, if Fields is going to an A1 organization and Lawrence is going to a D, you can definitely close that gap pretty quickly. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's one thing that we don't really look at a whole lot, right? We just, this guy busted. Where in reality, he was stuck he might have just been stuck in a really bad situation. There's only so much you can do when you've got, a really bad team around you. And you don't have that here in San Francisco. You've got a really good group. They have some things that I'd be nervous about from the injury standpoint, but
for sure,
they definitely have a really good team around them that I think is gonna help boost up whoever that is that they decide to take.
Yeah, as long as we don't take a knucklehead like Haskins or something like that, we'll be probably okay as far as putting him in a good position to succeed.
Yeah. One of the funny things that I saw this is everybody with the excitement of the pro days was the whole the 40-yard times of the quarterbacks, and that really made me laugh. And I sent out a tweet. I don't know if you noticed it, but it was basically said something like 40-yard times are about as important for a quarterback as being able to push a Ford LTD station wagon 30 yards. And there's a lot of people watching this show that probably don't get that reference.
Yeah.
But, if you go back in time with the 49ers, before Alex Smith, the previous, I think, number 1 pick at quarterback had been, what's his name?
Well, you're talking about Plummer and Druckenmiller?
Druckenmiller, right?
Yeah.
They took Jim Druckenmiller in the first round instead of taking Jake the Snake. And, he made everybody want to think they were drunk instead of Druckenmiller. It was about it. And then if the big thing around that was that he won a strength and conditioning contest, beating as much of the linemen out at Virginia Tech at the time, pushing the car for 30 yards was part of the course.
Yeah. Hey, Zachy says it cost Mooch his job. It sure did. Sure did.
That was part of it.
2 last questions, and I know that we gotta buzz out, but 2 last ones, and I'll throw them out to you. All right. So Zachy says, does today's news that Lynch and Shanahan are not on the same page concern you? Does it concern you, Jack?
It doesn't concern me. I'm actually glad the fact that right now they're not agreeing on who they're going to go with. I think that kind of I'm not sure of the word. I'm kind of blanking out right there, but that discontent between the two of them, that only fuels the creativity of what the decision is finally going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would tend to agree with you. I don't think Shanahan's the type of guy that's going to listen. He comes across to me like he's very stubborn, and I would think a normal coach in that scenario would say, okay, well, you're seeing something that I'm not. Let's talk to the scouts. Let's bring everybody in on this decision. I feel like he's so stubborn, and really it almost sounds like from everything that I've heard that the contention is not only Kyle, but it's Mike Shanahan. And when you get 2 of them, those 2 together saying, hey, this is the quarterback, that's a concern. Like it tells me that they're going to be very stubborn on this, and they're going to go with whoever they want. And John, unfortunately probably doesn't have a say-so in this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And then the last one was Jason Ellsworth says, what do you guys think of Mac Jones not taking his second pro day serious, with him being all lax and missing a lot of passes? Took it as he isn't competitive and is fine with not being perfect. That's how I took it. What about you, Jack?
I don't know about that. I think there's a couple of different things there. He was trying to show his personality in that a little bit. His teammates all love him for a reason. I think part of the reason they love him is because he is competitive. When that ball gets snapped, when they're on the field and it's time to go, it's time to go. And so I think he was locked in. I think the problem, and this is going to sound like an excuse because it kind of is. I think it's a little bit of an explanation of maybe what had happened. I wasn't there in his head, so I don't know. But Mac Jones is a guy, when he throws a deep ball, he throws a lot of arc on the ball, very similar to Russell Wilson in that way. And so when he throws that first deep ball and it gets hit by the light and comes down, I think he adjusted at that point, and he's like, I need to try to keep the ball off the roof, and in doing that, it just changes it because the flatter you go, it's going to be it's a harder completion on those deep balls. You've got to be able to get a lot of air under it. That's one of the things I say a lot on my breakdowns, whether it's by myself or if I'm working with Grant on those. Is that the quarterback's got to get the ball up in the air to give the receiver a chance to make a play, and so that could have been part of it. I mean, when you watch that pro day, Jesse, I think for the most part, though, other than those deeper balls that he missed, he was pretty spot on. I think was he not?
Yeah, he definitely was.
Yeah, so it's the deep balls, and that's my excuse for him.
Yeah, I guess my issue that I take, and maybe it's not his fault, but whoever the hell that QB coach is, dude, you guys practice this script, okay? You were asked to do certain things on the second pro day. Teams wanted to see you throw deep. You had a few days to prepare for that. I know you had to have been doing it in that same spot. Did this not come up at any point? Like, the net was never a concern? And if it was, why didn't you move it outside or figure out another place to go just so that your guy could look the best? Again, whoever his handlers are and his QB coach, I put the blame on them for that, to be real with you, because I got to imagine that this was a concern or it happened at some point during practice.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's something you had mentioned to me a couple of days ago when it first happened. I totally agree with you. That's something that if that's something that they had seen happen prior to that, should have been taken care of, and they should have moved it outdoors and let him throw in the elements. He's going to be playing outdoors anyway wherever he goes from a lot of these places. So that's part of why people liked what's his name, Pat Mahomes so much, Patrick Mahomes. So,
yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Last one before we get out. Leaving says Jay Cutler, the last Mike QB pick. Well, technically, him and Kyle both took Kirk Cousins the same year that they took RG3. So Cousins would actually be the last pick that they took at a QB.
Yeah.
Together.
Correct.
So Mike's last pick would have been Cousins.
Yeah. And Cutler was the last one he did by himself. So
yes.
I don't know. And the thing with the Cutler thing, people like to bring that one up partly because he didn't go out and scout Cutler before that pick was made, and nobody was out there for Lance's pro day. So that's where you see that coming from a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, very much like Lance. I mean, talk about a strong arm. I would say the difference is, I think from the shoulders up, Lance has it all together. I think he has a chip on his shoulder. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was recruited to the Big Ten to be a linebacker. He obviously loves being quarterback and loved it so much that he was willing to take a step back and go to North Dakota State. That should tell you all you need to know. Jay Cutler, to me, came across a guy that absolutely did not love football. So, yeah, that's what you saw. Well, Jack, good show, man. 47 minutes flew by, didn't it?
It sure did. It goes by quick. We hope everybody enjoyed the show. This is always a lot of fun to get together with Jessie and chop this up and look at what's going on with the 49ers. So we really appreciate it. I know Jessie and I hopefully we'll be able to start getting some guests out here for you too as well. It's just us two knuckleheads, as the one guy said. And it'll definitely be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, until next week, man, I appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Thank you, guys.